This morning you walked across some grass, or a parking lot, or your own backyard, and you didn't think about it once. You put your foot down without checking. You let your dog run. Maybe a kid kicked a ball across a field somewhere near you, and the only thing anyone worried about was a broken window. In Laos, a country of about 7.5 million people in Southeast Asia, that exact ordinary moment, a foot on soil, a shovel in a garden, a fire lit on the ground, can end a life. Because underneath the farms, the schoolyards, the rice paddies, and the villages of Laos, there are an estimated 80 million unexploded bombs. Not from a war happening now, from a war that ended 50 years ago, a war that, officially, never happened at all. Here's the part that sounds made up. Laos is the most heavily bombed country per person in human history. Not Germany, not Japan, not Vietnam. Laos, a country most people can't find on a map, that has never attacked the United States, and that was declared officially neutral by international agreement in 1962. Between 1964 and 1973, American aircraft flew about 580,000 bombing missions over it. Do the math on that, and it comes out to one plane load of bombs every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day, for 9 straight years. More than 2 million tons of ordnance fell on a country roughly the size of the United Kingdom. That's more than the US dropped on Germany and Japan combined during all of World War II. On a country it was not at war with. So how does that happen? How do you bomb a neutral country around the clock for 9 years without it becoming the biggest story on the planet? You do it in secret. And this is where the story stops being about bombs and starts being about paperwork. In the early 1960s, the Cold War was being fought everywhere except on paper. Vietnam was escalating next door, and North Vietnamese forces were moving troops and supplies south along a network of jungle paths that hugged the Laotian side of the border, the Ho Chi Minh Trail. At the same time, inside Laos, a civil war was grinding on between the royal government and a communist movement called the Pathet Lao. Washington looked at the map and saw 2 problems in one country. But there was a catch. The Geneva Agreement of 1962, which the United States had signed, guaranteed Laos's neutrality. Sending in the army would mean publicly tearing up a treaty, so the army never officially went. Instead, the CIA did. What followed became known as the Secret War, and the name is not an exaggeration. The operation ran out of an air base in Thailand, used pilots who flew without military identification, and recruited a fighting force of tens of thousands from the Hmong, an ethnic minority in the Laotian mountains, led by a general named Vang Pao. American pilots dropped bombs over Laos while the American government told the American public and Congress that it was doing no such thing. For years, the entire air campaign was funded through hidden channels and run by an intelligence agency instead of the military, which meant no war declaration, no press briefings, no casualty reports, and no debate. An entire country was being cratered, and the paperwork said nothing was happening. And the bombing itself had a strange bureaucratic cruelty to it. A significant portion of the bombs dropped on Laos weren't even aimed at Laos. American bombers heading to targets in Vietnam would sometimes get called off, bad weather, target canceled, and landing a plane loaded with live bombs is dangerous. So standing procedure became, don't bring them home. Crews released their payloads over the Laotian countryside simply because it was on the way back. Entire villages were destroyed as a disposal method. Somewhere in that sentence is the whole insanity of the thing. People died under bombs that were dropped so that a plane could land more comfortably. Then there's the specific weapon that turned 9 years of bombing into 50 years of aftermath, the cluster bomb. A cluster bomb is a big casing that splits open in the air and scatters hundreds of small bomblets across an area the size of several football fields. In Laos, they're called bombies, and they're about the size of a tennis ball or an orange. The US dropped an estimated 270 million of them on Laos. And here's the number that built the next half-century of tragedy. Roughly a third of them didn't go off. They just landed, in mud, in rice paddies, in tree canopies, in riverbanks, and waited. Armed, intact, and the size of a fruit. That's where the 80 million figure comes from. 80 million small explosive devices scattered across farmland that did not expire when the war did. The war part of the story ends in 1973, when the bombing stopped, and the secret part starts to end in 1971, when congressional hearings began dragging the operation into daylight, and stunned senators discovered the scale of what had been done without their approval. But for Laos, nothing ended. The bombs were still there. And Laos is a country where about 3/4 of people live off the land, which means the exact activity most of the population does to survive, digging soil to plant rice, is the exact activity most likely to detonate a bombie. Since the war ended, more than 20,000 people in Laos have been killed or injured by unexploded ordnance. Not soldiers, farmers, scrap collectors, and children. Because a small round metal object lying in the grass looks, to a kid, exactly like something you pick up. Roughly 40% of the victims have been children. So the people of Laos did what people do. They adapted, in ways that are somehow both inspiring and heartbreaking to look at. Drive through bombed provinces like Zeng Quang today, and you'll see houses standing on stilts made from bomb casings, canoes made from fuel tanks dropped by American planes, planters, buckets, cowbells, fences, all made of war scrap. In a village called Ban Napia, families melt down aluminum from downed ordnance and pour it into molds to make spoons, selling them to visitors. An entire domestic economy grew out of the metal that fell from the sky, which sounds almost charming until you remember that collecting that scrap is one of the leading ways people get killed, because you can't always tell the difference between a dead piece of metal and a live one until it decides for you. And the cleanup? This is the reveal that reframes everything you just heard. At the height of the secret war, the United States was spending, in today's money, over $13 million a day bombing Laos. For the first 2 decades after the war, the US spent barely a few million a year helping clean it up. There were years where America spent more in 3 days of bombing Laos than it spent in 30 years of demining it. Clearance teams, many of them local women trained as technicians, sweeping fields inch by inch with metal detectors, have been working for decades, and they have cleared only a small fraction of the contaminated land. At the current pace, finishing the job is measured not in years, but in generations. In 2016, Barack Obama became the first sitting US president to visit Laos, acknowledged the secret war openly, and pledged $90 million over 3 years toward clearance, which was a historic increase, and also, for scale, roughly what the original bombing campaign spent in a week. So go back to this morning. You walked across the ground without thinking, because for you, the ground is just ground. In Laos, the ground has a memory. A farmer clearing a new field this week will hire a survey team before touching it, or take the risk and dig anyway, because rice doesn't wait. A school will build its playground only after someone with a metal detector has walked every square meter of it. Somewhere today, a 50-year-old machine the size of an orange is sitting under 6 inches of soil, still doing the one job it was built for, waiting. The war was secret. The bombs were secret. The only thing that was never secret for the people living there was the ground itself, and it still isn't done talking.